Hello and welcome, beautiful people. Today we're going to be looking at creating our counter app, and we're going to be doing it using Redux Toolkit, normal state component, normal React hooks, using the life cycle class methods, and using normal Redux. So we're going to be building one application using different systems so that you're going to learn a whole lot of things. You're going to be learning about states, props, and many other things. Okay, so this is the little app that we're going to be building out, but we're going to later add CSS to this very app to make it look even more beautiful. Okay, so when we build it out the first time, it's going to look like this. Then we're going to use CSS, add it up to make it look very good. Now, in building this app, you're going to find out that this 0 is going to be changing when you click this plus button. The more you click it, the more it changes, it increases. If you click the negative button, the minus is going to reduce. So you're going to find out that this number count is going to be the state because it's going to be changing. So when you're building your app, you're supposed to draw out what we call the architecture of the app. So in it, you're going to be able to identify what are the states that could be changing. So like this count, this 0 now is going to change from 1 to 2. So this is the state. And you're going to pass this state to this very component, these buttons, plus and minus, so that they can be able to change it. So we're going to have these plus and minus inside a separate component known as the button component. And we're going to use props to pass in either plus or minus, since that's going to be the changes in these two. So we're going to be building a reusable component known as button, that in one case is going to be the addition button and in another case is going to be the subtraction button. So we're going to use title props to pass in plus and minus, so that one code for button that does for plus is also going to do for minus. So we're going to be building what we call reusable components. Then this state known as count is going to be passed down to this component so that they can manipulate it. So in the first app we're going to be building, we're going to be using what we call the useState to do it using the normal React hooks. Then later we're going to be using constructor and the normal lifecycle method to use the class-based component structure. Then later we're going to still rebuild the same component using what we call the Redux toolkit. Then we're going to also use normal Redux. Then we're going to use context API. So by the time we are done with all these, you are ready to go. Okay. So let me quickly bring up my code editor. And as you all know, we are using VS Code. So this is the normal app, and you can see that I've removed everything and it's just showing app. So I can just change this. This is what we are going to be using. So I can call these the counter app. So that's what we're going to be building. So we're going to be building the counter app. I'm going to make sure that this is in capital letters, capitalized. So once I change, you're going to be seeing the changes down here. You can see the counter app. So let's build out this our application. Okay, so we're going to be starting from scratch. We'll build it out without CSS. Then later we're going to add CSS, and you're going to see how these things, how they come together to make them what they are. So first of all, we're going to be using the React hook. So we're going to be using the useState hook. So how do we do that? If you want to use useState, you must first of all make sure that you import the useState hook. Very, very important. So I'm going to be importing that very hook. So the hook, the way you import it is when you just type useState. Very simple, useState. Okay. So that is the hook we are going to be using, the useState hook. So you can see the way I just imported it, because that is what we're going to be using to manage the component-based state that we're going to be building out. Okay. So very quickly, that is what we're going to be doing. So I'm going to quickly go to this SRC folder. You can see the way I clicked on it. So I'm going to go to create folder. You can see it here, new folder. So I'm going to build out my what? Components. So this is the components folder. Then inside the components folder, that is where I'm supposed to have my buttons. That is where I'm supposed to have my buttons. Okay. So inside this very folder, I'm going to create button. So here I'm just going to click here and I'm going to say, remember, components has to start with capital letter. So I'm going to have my button. You can see it there. So I'm going to have in .jxx. You know, in the previous classes we are having, we are creating it using .js. So you can use JSSS so that you can have the full weight of your JavaScript XML in place working for you. Okay. So instead of me using arrow FCE the way I normally do, before I was using arrow FCE in order to just scaffold it, I'm going to type this from scratch so that you can also learn how to do all these things from scratch. So I'm going to quickly start by saying, making my import statement. So I'm going to say import. What am I going to be importing? I want to be importing React. That's what I want to be importing. So I want to import it from what? React. So you can see it's already helping me to write this out. So that's the first thing I'm doing. So import React from React. Interesting. So the next thing I'm going to be doing will be to write my function components. Okay. So there are two ways you can export. You can export from below or by simply saying export. This is another way you can do it by saying export default. So I'm going to be teaching us a whole lot of things here so that we understand how these things work. So export default function. So what is the name of the function? We're going to find out that it will be what? Button. Then inside here, we're going to bring in props. Very, very important. So I'm going to bring in props because like I say, we're going to be passing states from one component from the root component, which is the app.js. This very app.js, we're going to be passing prop into this button. So that's why I have it like that, okay? So I'm going to go over here and open up my stuff. So this is the normal way you write a function button. That's a normal way you write a function in JavaScript. But we use this export default because we don't want to export down. But we're also going to learn how we can do that. So here I'm going to simply say return. Okay, so what am I going to return? So I'm going to simply return a button component. Okay, so I'm going to return a normal button. Let's just return a normal. You know how to create a normal button in HTML. So this is a normal button. I can give it an on-click action. So I can give this an on-click action if I want. Okay, so but let me just return a normal button and just call it admin. Okay, so that is the button that I've returned. So I'm going to save this quickly and I'm going to try to make sure that I import it here. So how do you import? We already know that, how to import. So how do we import? So I'm going to come down here and simply say import. So just take a little thought and know how to import. So you can just import button from the button component that is here. So I'm going to simply say import in capital letter button from. So where is the button located? So you can find out that the button is located inside the / because it's the same folder is at the same level as the app.js. So I'm going to now say what component. You can see it's already writing component for me. So I'm going to say component / button. Okay, so I've imported that. And even if I don't import it, sometimes once I write it here, it will automatically import for me. Okay, so I'm going to bring in that button by simply doing this. So this is the button component. Okay, so you can see I've brought in the button. So if I save this file now, I should be able to see my button down here. Okay, so you can see it here, add me. So you can see add me is already here because I just brought in this button. But you can see that I did not create it here. This is where I created it. But I was able to bring it here because I imported it first and I used the JXS normal tag syntax to bring in the button. Okay, so it's telling me a warning that I've not used my useState, which I'm going to try to use now. Okay, so let's go back to this and explain the concept of I want to explain the concept of props. The concept of props is very, very important. Okay, so let's try to understand what prop is and try to use it to do this. Okay, so you can see this button now is not being reused. Like I just created in such a way that I can use it to only do admin. So I want this very admin to be able to be either plus or minus. That's what I want it to be. So I want it to be able to change. So I'm going to put it in form of a prop that can be passed in and out, okay? So that we can either change it to add me or subtract me, okay? So these props that is here now can actually be destructured into many other things. So destructuring is very, very important when you're writing a JavaScript code. You need to learn both object destructuring and what we call object destructuring and array destructuring. So we're going to be passing down using some props. So let me do this. So I'm gonna let me do this first, so then I can explain it. So let me say the kind of action that is going to be performed by the button. Know that this button is going to do both addition and subtraction. So I'm going to say, and also title. Title is going to be like plus or minus. Sorry. So these are the two things, and we're going to get this out all from the props. Okay, so I'm getting the title and action from props. These very props that I passed in. So I'm destructuring action and title from it. Okay, so that instead of now writing my add me here, I can simply write that this should be title instead of add me. So I'm going to have titles. So that means I can actually reuse this for both plus or minus. So you're going to see that when I call it from the root component, which is the app.js. Then very importantly, this is my button now. I'm going to add what we call the onClick. I'm going to add the onClick attribute to it so that once I click on it, something will happen. So I will simply say onClick. So onClick, what do I want to happen when I unclick it? So onClick, I want it to perform an action. So do you want it to increment or decrement? I simply want to write action so that it can do both. It can either do incrementing or decrementing. Okay, so that's what I have there. Okay, so with that, I have a functional component that can actually be reused. Okay, so that's what we're having. So I'm going to save this, but the code is going to break momentarily. Okay, see, nothing is coming now because I've not assigned this as an attribute. So I will now go to app.js. So this is where I'm going to assign this. So I'm going to reuse this same button to do two different things. Okay, so this same one button is going to be able to do both addition and subtraction, and also have the two of them. Okay, so I'm going to come here now inside this button now, and I'm going to, because I already have these title props, and I'm going to now say equal to. So what do I want to come here? What do I want to be printed out here? So I simply want something like this. So I want this to be printed out. I want the first one should be minus like this, then plus the other side. So I'm gonna have minus here. Okay, so that is what this is gonna have. So if I now repeat this same button, okay, and now give it a title of, you see, like I said before, this title is just similar to attributes. So I now give it a title of system around plus. Okay, then I try to close this. Make sure you always close this. Then I save. Okay, so you can now see we have minus and plus. So you can see the same component that I built here. This is one component, but it's now into two buttons now. And you can see that I can now change minus and plus, because here I used props to be able to, I destructured the elements of this prop, which are action and title. So title is simply what will come in it, like in here. This is title that as I have assigned. So the next thing is for me to assign the action. That's the next thing. So I'm gonna assign an action to it. So what will be the action that I will assign to this very button? So I can call it to decrement the count or to increase the count. So I can say that this action, you remember this curly bracket, I've already explained it before. I say that's how you bring in a JavaScript into this. So I can say, I can call this dec. Okay, let me call it something you understand. I can call it decrement count. I would have said dec count, but decrement count will be more understandable. I can even call it decrement counter. That's another way of saying it. So I'm going to take decrement counter becomes the name of that one. So I'm going to have this other one, action. And I'm going to tell it to do what? This time around, this one is going to be the opposite. So I'm going to call it increment counter. So you can see. So we have a complete something here. So I can save and still be seeing my normal count. Okay. So now it's telling me that I've not created decrement counter and increment counter. So let me create these two. So I'm going to create the decrement counter and the increment counter. Okay, so now these counters that I'm going to be decrementing and incrementing, they are going to be using the state, the count state. So in order to use this use state that I had, remember that I had imported use state here. So I'm going to use it to manage the state. So in order to do this, I'm going to say const, very important, this is how you write this. Then you use the square bracket. So you're going to get out the count and the set count. Very, very important. So I'm going to say count. I hope I'm getting the right spelling. Comma. Set count. And you see the way I wrote it, that's the way you should write it. Count and set count. Okay. So make sure that they are equal to. So make sure that both of them are equal to use state. Very, very important. So once you write your use state, you must have to attach the initial value. So initial value, I'm going to use here. This out. So you can see now that I'm able to bring in this count. So the next thing to do, now that you've brought in using the use state the count, and you've assigned the initial value of the count to 0, now you can write out the functions. Now let me write out the function. So what are the functions I'm going to be writing out? I'm writing decrement counter and increment counter. Those are the two functions I'm going to be writing. So to write them very simple, I'm going to say let, you already know this, let increment counter. That's how you write a function. So I'm going to be using the arrow function so that you also learn how to use arrow function to write a code. So you know this is the normal syntax of an arrow function. Okay. So what is it going to be giving? So I'm going to write this out. So what will be the function of this increment counter? So this increment counter is going to use this very set count here and set the count by adding 1. Okay, so that's what it's going to do. So I'm going to say set count, then in brackets. So what is the set count going to do? It's going to simply say count plus 1. Okay, so that is what the set count is going to be done. Okay, so that handles that for set count. So what will the decrement count do? So I'm going to also write the other function. Let decrement count. So what is this one going to do? This one is going to also use the set count. So what is going to, you're going to send it to -1. So you can see set count and decrement count. You understand? They are using the set count. This set count is this one. This is the count. So this one is going to set it. Once I click this button, it's going to decrement. Whereas once I click this button, it's going to increase by 1. Okay. So that is what you're supposed to do. Now, where should I output the count so that I can see whether it's changing or not? Where should I output the count? So I'm going to simply come here and use my history tag. Then here I'm going to be able to show my count by using this curly bracket. So inside the curly bracket, I'm going to have the count. Okay, then I'll save. So at this juncture, your app should run. So you can see very simple code that we brought in and we're able to do this. So we can now click on this. You can see it's increasing. 5, 6. You can see our app is already working. If you click here, it's decreasing. You can see. You click here, it's increasing. So you can see our counter app is working by just writing small amount of code. So I'm going to make this big so that you can see it clearly. So you can see very small line of code, the buttons for increment, decrement, and everything. So this very button is actually done here, and we are reusing it because we're able to pass in the prop. So you can see the prop here with destructor. If you don't want to destructor this prop, you can also write this thing line by line here. You can, instead of doing this destructor, let me comment it out now. So we can just simply come here and say props.action instead of destruction. I can say props.action. Then for this title, I can say props.title. So if I save this, I still get the same thing. Okay. So you can see the app is still working perfect. So this is the way you can do this by simply saying prop dot prop dot. So with this prop, it enables this very component to be reused. So that is how you create a counter app. So we're going to be adding a CSS now to make this counter app look much more beautiful. So we'll add up a CSS and we'll add some classes, and you're going to see that this is going to look much more beautiful. Okay, so let's since our app already has the functionality that we want, it can decrease, it can increase. Let's make this app to look even more beautiful by using CSS. Okay, so you know that the major aspect major concern of this very lecture is not for us to learn CSS, but for us to learn React. So we're not gonna be spending more time on the CSS. I'm gonna pick up a CSS file and put in and show you what it is doing. So quickly, let me still explain this code so that we can understand it very importantly. So first of all, what we did was to import React and useState. We imported useState because we know we're going to use this state to set the initial state to 0 and also use it to manipulate here to bring out our state here. Then we use the set count. The set count part of the useState is using setting the count. That's what, whenever you click on the action, it sets the count by adding 1. If you do the other one, it set the count by decreasing 1. So we use this button component that we created here using the JSS. We imported it over here. Then we replicated it for both minus and plus. And we now use the props title and the action props, which we brought in here with the structured here. But we say even if we don't want to destructure, we can use prop.action and props.title. So that is how we got this app put together. So we're going to now be using a CSS. So I'm going to quickly bring in a CSS file. So this is a counter CSS file that I had earlier put together. So I'm going to be using it in this code so that it will make our app to look much more beautiful. Okay, so I'm going to come to these src here. I'm going to create another folder. I'm going to call this folder assets. So assets is the name of the folder. So inside this very assets folder, I'm going to create, this folder is going to have all our assets. So I'm going to create another folder inside it, and I'll call this folder CSS because that is where I want to keep my CSS files. Okay, so inside this CSS, I'm going to have my style.css. I'm going to click here and click a file, and I'll call this file style.css. Okay, so inside this style.css, that's where I'm going to paste in my my CSS code. So like I said before, I have this CSS code already here. So I'm going to do Control A to pick it up. I'm going to do Control C to copy, Control A to select, then Control C to copy, then I fix it here. So this is the CSS. So I'm going to do now Control S to save it in. So I have this CSS inside this assets folder. Okay, so I'm going to close it up. So you can take note of the various selectors. You have the .app and .app.count. So all these selectors I'm going to be using inside the main file. So when I now come to this main file, I want to call that CSS and be able to use it. So that's what I'm going to be doing in this file, to call the CSS I'm going to be, so that I'll be using. So you can see that the CSS I'm using here is app.js CSS for the one that came with this scaffolding of this app. So I don't want to use this again, so I'm going to just take it out and now import the CSS that I want to use. So I want to make sure that this React is the first import. It's always good to organize your import very well. So I'm going to now import the CSS. So how do I import the CSS? I simply say import. So what is the name of this CSS? So you know I called it, it's inside the assets folder. So if I do like this, because it's in the same level as the app.js, so that very folder, what is the name of that folder? The name of that folder is assets. So it's not the components folder. Take note, the name of the folder is assets. So and inside assets we have the CSS folder. Then inside the CSS folder, that's where I put the style.css. So that is how you import. So that is how you import. Take note. Okay, so I can save this. So with this now, I have my new So please let me still minimize this so that when I start adding the codes, you can be seeing the effects. So you can see now that the CSS is changed. This everything is now on the other side. So I'm going to be adding the class names now so that it will bring it back to normal. So let me start adding the class names. Okay. So let me get to this return. So this one is still having the class name of app. Okay, so I'm gonna, you know, the app is in small letter in the other. I'm gonna quickly do it like this. So with that alone, it has brought it down to this middle. Okay, so I'm gonna be having a div that is surrounding the count. So let me have a div surrounding the count. So inside this place, I'm gonna simply create a div. Why I'm creating this div is because I already have a div there. So what is the name? What is the class of this name? So you know, in recent times, you can actually have class instead of class name because the way it is now built, there's no more confusion between the normal class of the class-based component and class in the what's it called, the CSS. So you can actually use class instead of class name. So I'm gonna have count. Count is one of the classes that I have there. Okay, so if I save again now, okay, so inside this, I'm going to make sure that Control X, I'm going to make sure that this is inside this div. Okay. Okay. Okay, so that is that. So I'm going to bring in another class. These buttons, I'm going to put them inside their own div. Okay. I'm going to come here, bring in another div. So inside this div, I'm going to have a class. And that class should be equal to button. The class should be equal to buttons because that's the name of the other one there. So take note, all these are already inside the CSS file. So I have that. Make sure that this other div is closing it out and not here. Control X. So this div should be here. So that when you save, you see it's gonna look so it's looking even much better. Okay, so the next thing will be the count. I want to have a count written here with S3. I want to just have the word count. So I'm gonna save this. Okay, so it's now written. So I'm gonna take out this other one. Okay, so I have count and count. Okay, nice one. So I'm gonna have this to be here. Okay, so it's telling me now that the count is 5. So if I click here, it's decreasing. If I'm clicking here, it's increasing. Okay, so it's making much sense. So I'm gonna have this one as H3 and this other count as H1. Okay, so my normal count is gonna be H1, whereas this other count is gonna be H3. So let me put this one as H1 so that there'll be a difference in the visuals. So if I save now, okay, so this looks much better. Okay, so if I open my style.css, you will understand this is for the the app selector, which you can see here. This is the app here. So it's simply telling us that we're going to have a display flex direction row, justify center, and margin top to be RM. That's why everything is in center, because you justify center. Then the count inside the app, that's what this second one is saying. This very count, class count, that's inside the class app. So what kind of visuals do you want for it? You want it to be margin, bottom 2 rems, test align center, display flex, and margin 10 rem. Then for the count, the H3 inside the count that is inside the app. So if you look at here, this is the H3 that is inside the count that is inside the app. Okay, so you see all these are actually reflecting what is there. So it's line weight of 8 point this. That's why the H3 is like this, whereas the H1 is bigger. This is the H1. Then for the button, this is what we used in styling the button to be in circular form. So you can see it here, border radius of 50. Once you do border radius of 50, you have this circular form. If you change it to maybe border radius of say 20, then you save. It's not gonna, you see, the button has changed. It's no longer circle. So if you want it to be circle, then this has to be 50. Very, very important. So this shadow looking, that's why this thing is very light down here. Then on hover, it's having a different effect. Okay, so that is what this style is all about. That's what the style is all about. So you can, once you're adding, the more you're adding more CSS classes, the more you're getting it to look better. Okay, so let me see whether I still need to do 1 or 2 more things to make it look even better. Make sure div. Close it out here. Okay, so you see with this extra div, this is now up here and this one is down here. Very cute, very cute. Okay, so I can simply okay, it's already I just did Ctrl S to save, and prettier organized it for me. So you can see that our app is looking so fine. So I can decrease here and I can increase here. Okay, so our app is good. So in subsequent classes, we are going to also have another button known as reset button added. Okay, we can even do it now. So I can now copy this again and now put it down here.
Hello? How
So if I take this,
afternoon, no. You go
Ctrl+C,
anything less than afternoon. I don't like what they will say to you.
put this, so I can have this to be
Now
something
wait
like
first. I want to do by myself. Let us go together.
reset. I can have this as reset. So I'm having another button, reset, to reset. Okay, so I can do that here, but let's leave this for the next class. Okay, so that if we want to put minus times, we can also put this here, something like this. Okay. Okay, so you can actually make your make a whole calculator with this. So I'll copy this again, put it down, then this one. Okay, so you can see you're almost building a calculator. So you're reusing this same component, button component, but we're assigning different props to it. So these props can help you to reuse a component. But take note, you have to set it out in such a way. First of all, you must put props here. This must take this argument as props. Then you have to tell it what kind of thing you want it to be doing here. So these props, what kind of props are you looking for? You're looking for action and title. So that when you now come here and assign something to that action and title, then it will now use that to work. So that is how it's going to be. So in subsequent classes, we're going to be building out this same application using both Redux Toolkit and Redux. Thank you, and see you when I see you. If you have any question, please drop them in the comment section. Thank you.